Hey friends, welcome back. I'm going to talk in this video about how to reduce some of the anxiety that can come from regrets and thinking about things in the past, maybe having resentments or grudges or carrying around baggage. And this relates to the music mindfulness work. If you're not familiar with my Evolve podcast and some of the teachings that I review in those episodes, and there's over 20 of them, do yourself a favor because it'll help you understand what I'm going to talk about in this one, and go listen to some of those. But even if you haven't listened to those, you can still enjoy this lecture. And this is going to be a lecture. I'm not going to be teaching music in this, but I will be discussing this idea of music mindfulness with specifically the goal of helping you and helping our friends that are interested in this. And this came from a question from one of the students that we have about how to reduce some of the feelings that you don't want to have or that aren't serving you. And so I'll try to make this brief, but we're basically going to be talking about regrets and how to mitigate some of the effects of having what I would say is too much past, right? Too much past thinking in your present thinking. So when I just use these terms, and I've talked about these in the podcast, so I'll do my best to bring you up to speed. If I'm using jargon, I don't want to use a lot of jargon, but I talk about this idea of having too much past or too much future thinking, and what that does is it squeezes out the amount of presence that we have, right? Because we can only kind of experience something in the present. So if we're experiencing a lot of thoughts about the past or the future, it just makes it seem as if we're not present, right? That makes sense, right? So let's look at why you might be having a lot of thoughts of the past. Now, of course, a lot of the thoughts about the past that we have that don't necessarily help us feel how we want to feel in the present have to do with little traumas or little events, where there was a conflict, there was a struggle, there was an event, there was, and that could be a physical thing, a personal thing, emotional things. Usually, and I'm not here to be your psychologist or psychiatrist, but we all know that usually the things that pop out in our memories are events where there was a strong emotional event as well, like a reaction, right? We know that. That's common knowledge. So what do we do with these peaks in our memories and emotional moments when they keep coming back and maybe bringing us along with that memory, the anxiety or whatever it was that we felt in that moment that we don't necessarily want to feel now, right? So we could call this ruminating about the past. Now, one of the signs that could be happening with you or someone else, let's think about someone else for a second. Maybe you have people in your life that when you talk to them, they seem to often story tell or go into story mode about things that they find hurtful or harmful or undesirable, right? They'll just end up kind of divulging, and I think it's natural that they want to do that because it's causing them some anxiety. So I'm not judging people for doing that. I'm just saying you probably notice some people tend to talk about their pasts a lot and not only talk about the past, but talk about things that they don't enjoy, that they didn't like. Maybe it was a grievance or somebody did something. And I'll give you a quick example. Maybe you ask somebody, hey, what's going on? And they'll immediately start telling you about the last thing that happened to them where they felt some sort of trespass was made upon them, right? Like somebody took their parking spot or somebody said something rude at the grocery store or, and they just kind of focus on that stuff. These sort of, I don't know what you call it. You could call it a trespassing or a betrayal or just people being rude, some sort of attack. They feel like they've been attacked. And that's what they're focusing on. Now let's think about why. Now you can just observe your own behavior. What are your stories that you're telling other people, and what are the stories that you're bringing back up and thinking about? Now, we all do that. So first of all, that's a normal part of being a human. So we don't want to judge that. The question is, what are we going to do with that? And that's where we can talk about mindfulness or kindfulness, as I like to put it, music mindfulness. What are we going to do with the situation where we have thoughts about things that we don't feel good about that keep coming up? So first of all, I want to proposition you with why that happens. And my opinion is that happens because it's related to this idea of your mind as your helper. And I've talked about that in the podcast. Our minds are trying to help us solve a puzzle. And one of the reasons, I believe, these events keep coming up is we want to know why. Why did that happen, right? Why? I don't understand why they did that. I don't understand why this happened. And people have a million different reasons you could ascribe. Some people say it's God's will, or some people say, stuff happens. The key is to understand that your mind is just trying to solve that puzzle, that it's a question, right? It's what we call an open loop. It's something happened, and your mind is trying to answer the question, why did that happen? Now, that's what I would say, right? That's my opinion. Is there a solution? Is there an answer to the why? A lot of the times there really isn't. Now, it's like asking why it rained instead of sunshine. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why do things happen in nature? Is there really an answer to that? Or is the answer, there's a lot of stuff happening all the time, and the world is a dynamic place. Everything's bumping into something else all the time. And it's just an organic, dynamic system. And stuff is flowing in different directions, and including people, and including people's thoughts, and people say things, and they do things, and they pull into your parking spot that you had your eye on, and they say things that might be, you feel a little unkind, and that's really about them, not about you. Sometimes it rains on your head when you don't have an umbrella. So, yeah, stuff happens, but is there a reason that little trauma happened? I don't know that there's, a solution that your mind is going to be able to say, okay, now I understand why. I can check that off and I can move on. Because what's happening, if you keep having these same thoughts about past trauma, is that you're not able to move on, right? You haven't let it go. Keeps coming back. And that's your mind just tugging at your shirt, saying, I don't understand. I need to know why. And what I would say is, or I would ask to that little child in your mind that's tugging on your shirt is, it's okay. Sometimes there's just not an answer to a specific question of why things happen. Now, so I want to give you a few steps that might help you to process this. I know this isn't necessarily a satisfying answer. You want to be satisfied. You want a satisfying answer. Like, I need to know why. Why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? I think first of all, of course, it needs to start with accepting that different things happen. So acceptance, right? Accepting the situation. Okay, this happened. I'm not going to debate that because what that does is it gets rid of the that shouldn't have happened thinking. Now that kind of thinking is really not going to get you anywhere. So wanting the past to be different is futile, right? We don't want to do that. So just acknowledge, okay, that happened. Now that can put you in a spot where you can move on and start to look at things a little bit differently. And I talk about having different viewpoints, different perspectives. So a thing that I find helpful is just to have a sense of wonderment about things like, wow, that's crazy. I never expected that to happen, or I'm really surprised that this person might have said that. or yeah, that blows my mind. However you want to look at it, whatever words you want to use, maybe just adopt a sense of wonderment, like, wow, that's crazy. Who knew? And just kind of look at it like, okay, it's not something I would want, but it's interesting. I don't know why that happened, but I find it interesting. Yes, I got upset when that happened, but that's okay because my emotions come and go. But as far as what I'm going to do in the future with that information, I can just look at it like, wow, that was weird. I have certain words that I like to use that help soften events or just help me put them in a perspective where it's a little more manageable. You don't have to use the same words I'm using here. Just pick any words that work for you. And then a third thing you can do is, of course, look at it like, what can I learn from that? What's the lesson there? And therein, I can get some value out of it, even if I don't understand the why of why did that happen. I can certainly use that, right, to learn something. Don't walk over there at that time of day, or don't say these things to this person. Maybe change your expectations about things. Those are all things that you have control over that you can do, and that'll give you a little more sense of control and volition. Even though you might not have an answer, you have some kind of solutions about what you can do, right? And that, I think, could be comforting. Now, I want to talk about something that is really important, and you all know this, and that is, again, how we're processing things that happen. And this has to do with forgiveness. We know that forgiveness is super powerful, and there's lots of stories out there of people forgiving other people, even people that may have killed their family member. And they forgive them, and they usually say, I feel so much better. I'm not forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them for me, because I don't want to carry that. I don't want to feel the anger and have that grudge and resentment. And that is so true. And again, I know a lot of you know this, but I'm just going to say it because it's good to hear again and be a reminder. And that is that if you are angry about a situation, you're the one that feels that anger. You can be angry at someone, but they don't feel you're the one that is feeling the anger. Now think about that for a second. You're doing that to yourself. You are conjuring up it doesn't matter how angry you get at someone, you can't be angry on somebody and make them feel it. You are the one that is experiencing your emotions that you are creating. So understand that, take responsibility. It's very disempowering to actually say, you're making me angry. That is, not only is that an untrue statement, it's a dangerous statement in terms of putting yourself in a victim role and staying there and not realizing that you have the ability to, just accept that you are creating your own emotional state and then you experience it. So yeah, I mean, in the moment, maybe something happens, you get upset. We all get upset. We get angry. But do we continue to re-anger ourselves over and over and over, even when the event is long gone, the person you're angry at or the event you're angry at, the situation, is not happening anymore. It hasn't happened for years. If you can pull yourself out for a second and look down upon yourself having that reaction, you might see how kind of ridiculous that is and how counterproductive it is. So, to quote Bob Newhart in I think it was a Saturday Night Live sketch, stop it. Stop doing that. Or at least, okay, you don't have to stop it if it's not, I know it's not easy. But when you start doing that, if you get angry at a memory, and the emotion you feel is real. So, this is serious stuff. I mean, if you want to feel better in your daily life, you need to deal with these things. at least start with acknowledging that that's what's happening. Like, don't say they're making me angry. Say I'm upset because I am having these thoughts and I'm getting myself angry. If you start with that, at least it can help you, it can empower you to change instead of putting yourself in a position where you feel like you have no control because you're projecting it onto the other person. You're saying, you're making me angry, which of course they're not. The situation was upsetting. The memory could be upsetting if you let it be, but at least know that you're the one that's in control of your emotions. That you're the one, getting angry, and you're the one that's experiencing the anger, and the anger isn't really helping you at all. Or whatever it is. It could be deep sadness. It could be any kind of emotion. But if you don't want to experience that, then I think it starts with acknowledging that you're, who's causing that emotion to come up. Now, forgiveness is a big one. And then there's a little more maintenance that you can do. And again, I've talked about this in the podcast episodes, but here's the thing I want to leave you with as a practice that you can do. And a lot of these steps, acceptance, looking at things with wonderment, drawing or deriving the lessons from some kind of trauma, some sort of event or pattern of events, forgiving people, really forgiving them, just saying, you know what? People say things, they do things, everybody's trying their best. And that's kind of a thing I go back to. I say, look, they're doing the best they can. If the best that they can do is yell at me, okay, that they're doing the best they can, and I guess they want to focus their anger on somebody outside of themselves. I happen to be standing there, they're yelling at me. I mean, that doesn't have to do with me. So they're doing the best they can. I forgive them. But the last thing is related to, you could call it loving kindness. You've heard of loving kindness meditations, and just really quick, something you could do, you can try, is to create your own meditation, which is kind of a, visualization, whatever you want to call it. Sit somewhere, have some time, and be in an environment that's not going to be distracting you. And imagine the subject of your anxiety and just try to send them kindness. Try to treat them like you would a child who's having a tantrum. And don't see their anger as something directed at you. See their anger as a problem they're having. And just hope that they can do better. Hope that they can feel better. Because if they feel better, if they do better, and here's the reality, you guys, if the people in your world, in your community, people you're in contact with, and everything you're in contact with, if all of that does better, you're going to do better because that's your world. That's your environment. So I always say to myself, I think, and I actually believe this, I want to help you because if you're doing better, I get to be in a world with people doing better. And if you're doing better, if you're happier, if you're elevated, if you're not angry, chances are that I'm not going to feel that anger, right? Because it's not in the environment. So I'd love us all to have that attitude. I mean, and that's not an original, that's not, something I came up with. This is about the ubuntu attitude or the ohana or aloha spirit or whatever you want to call it. This is nothing new. But that's why. That's why. Because my world is not made of me. My world, my experience, the world I experience is made up of everything except me. Right? It's everything outside of me. That's what I experience as the world. So your world is made up of everything except you. So don't focus on you. Focus on improving everything outside of you because that's what you experience. Now, there's a caveat to that, of course, because we're talking about focusing on reframing some memories. So I'm not saying never work on yourself, but I mean, don't focus on yourself as the ultimate solution. We also need to give kindness, acceptance, some love to our environment, which includes other people. So let's leave on that note with the idea of kindfulness, because that's what I like to think of. Instead of mindfulness, it's not so much about the mind, it's about being kind and carrying that kind of attitude. You could substitute the word kindfulness with aloha, spirit, with that idea of ohana, to use a couple Hawaiian words and concepts. Ohana, everybody's family. Lots of cultures, lots of languages you could represent that through many cultures, many languages. Namaste, right? However you want to, whatever you want to label you want to use is fine. That's not the important thing. But not only give people and events and things outside of yourself a kind of level of kindness, give it to yourself. And I'm going to circle this back around with the idea that we don't always get the answers that we want. And there may not be a satisfying answer for why did that happen. And just send yourself enough kindness to release the need to have solutions for life puzzles that are really not puzzles. They don't really have an answer. So be kind to yourself and cut yourself some slack and say, you know what? I don't need to know. I don't need to have an answer to that. Things happen. What's important is, how do I want to feel in this moment? Because right now is my life, right? My life is happening now. It's always happening now. We know that. So take care of the now by pushing out and making smaller past and future thinking and past and future traumas and experiences, and just enjoy the present as much as you can. All right, I'm going to wrap this talk up. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me. But I want to thank you for tuning in, and hopefully this is helpful. And if it is, let me know or let other people know. You can share this video or lesson with other people you care about. And I hope you do as well as you can, and you're experiencing kindfulness in yourself and in the community. Thanks for watching.